information, third party. I'm sorry. Still there.
All right, can we just get somebody online to confirm that you guys can hear the audio?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
All right, awesome, great, thank you. All right, well, thank you guys, everybody. Let me share the screen. I appreciate everybody being patient with us. We've had some audio video difficulties. Wouldn't be a meetup without it. All right. So all right, so welcome guys to the February meetup of the National Modern Excel and Power BI user group. It's exciting to have everybody here. Audience keeps growing more and more all the time. Yeah, so we've got a fun-filled day for you guys today. We've so first of all, for those of you who are in the room, if you guys want to sign on to the Wi-Fi. So the network is MSFT guest, and this is the event code. I'll bring this back up in just a second. You can snap this or jot it down. So when you, it's like one of those like captive Wi-Fi, I think is the term. So you're gonna hit this blue event attendee code button, and then the event attendee code is you updated this, right? So for today.
Oh, yeah, sorry, this is actually the.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah, we'll just pass that around then. Code there. All right. So for today, so it is lunchtime, whether you're here in person or at home or at work. So we encourage you guys to get some lunch or some pizza in the back. We have a few announcements and some what's new, and then so we decided that we were going to sort of kind of go back to basics for a little while, and there's a lot of new people who just learning Power BI for the first time. And it's always good to cover the basics. The technology is always changing, and so we thought it was a good idea to just sort of revisit some of these ideas, some of these topics, that maybe we've gone over before, but just to make sure that everybody's everybody's got sound on the fundamentals. So today we're covering Power Query. So Power Query, of course, is Power BI's ETL tool: extract, transform, and load. Basically, you got data in one or a dozen or a few dozen places all over your company, maybe outside your company. It might be a web page, for example. There's a lot of government websites that put the data. It's like it's like in the HTML. So it's on the web page, and you want to grab that data, right? And so how do you go get this data that's on all these different places? How do you mash it up together? And so the first thing that we got to do is we got to go gather all that data. We might want to make some transformation to that data. So we might want to aggregate that. We might want to unpivot some tables, for example. And so that is the transform step. And then the load, the L and the ETL is we're going to load this into Power BI so that we can then do some analysis on that data. So the data is in different places. We're going to extract that data. We're going to grab that data. We might transform some of that data, so we're going to massage it, make some modifications to it, and then we're going to load that data into Power BI. So Power Query is the ETL tool built into Power BI. It's going to help you with that job. And so Will Harvey, so the group's founder, when did you found this group? 8 years ago?
They did.
9?
Yeah, maybe they.
Yeah. It's about a year before Power BI was a thing, right? Yeah. Yeah, so it's been a little while. Anyway, so the group's founder, Will, is going to be introducing us to Power Query. He is a Power Query aficionado. He's probably forgotten more about Power Query than I have learned. So I'm looking forward to it. It's always some fun things there. And there's a lot of really neat things actually. There's a lot of power that Power Query has to do some fun stuff. All right, so I'm going to go over a few announcements. So first of all, we want to remind you guys of the YouTube channel. So we got lots of videos up there. Basically, since the start of the pandemic, we started doing virtual when we just recorded them. We're recording this one, and we put them up on YouTube for you guys to check out. There's some really interesting content up there. Alberto Ferrari, for example, was one. Reed Havens is another. Belinda Allen, Daniel Odekir, who created Tabular Editor. These are some really big names in the Power BI space, and we've had the good fortune of having them come speak to our group, and those are all recorded and on the YouTube channel. So I encourage you guys to check that out. So some upcoming meetings. So next month, March 23rd, we are doing measures and data models. So it's basically it's an introduction to DAX, and it's an introduction to data modeling. So I'm going to be giving this one. I've given this presentation several times before. So I feel like I've kind of got my spiel down. And to me, it's very important not to just communicate data model this away, because invariably you're going to come up with some scenario that you've never seen before and have no idea, like, okay, well, how do I do this? How do I deal with this whole new thing that wasn't in the class that I took? It's much more important for me that you understand the why we data model the way that we do. If you understand the why we data model the way that we do, then when you approach those new scenarios, you're going to have the knowledge to deal with those new scenarios in the most effective way possible. So that's really how I take this approach with teaching data modeling, is getting into the why behind the data modeling approach that we take. So that's going to be March 23rd at 11:30. And then in April, we're doing dashboard development and report design. And then we're doing something called Dashboard in an Hour in May. And I've seen this presentation done before. It's really, really a creative use of an hour. If you guys are at all new to Power BI, or even if you're not, this is very hands-on. So I encourage you to come to this one with your laptop and Power BI desktop installed, updated, and ready to rock and roll. And what we're going to do is we're going to send out some data samples and code samples ahead of time. And we're going to go through the process of the ETL, right? Where's the data? We're going to go gather the data. We're going to gather it up for you because we only have an hour, right? So, so we're going to gather up that data, transform it a little bit, load it into your data model, create some DAX measures, some business logic, and we're going to build a report. We only have an hour, so it's going to be a little streamlined. It's going to be a little simplified, but in an hour, you're going to learn all the basic steps of how to build a report. This is a really, really useful 1 hour session. If you guys ever taken the dashboard in a day, or if you've seen it, this is sort of similar to that, but kind of streamlined, condensed a little bit. So that's coming up in May. I think the date is TBD on that. So we will get back to you with more. We've also got some fun things lined up for the rest of the year. So in June, we're looking at maybe doing some case studies around, like, what are other people doing in Power BI. So so you guys are taking approaches to the problems that you have in Power BI. We thought it might be neat to see what are other people doing. What are some use cases that they have. Just to get some inspiration around how other people are solving their problems. We've got some slightly more advanced things coming up later in the year: time intelligence calculations, some next level visualization techniques. This might be bookmarks and buttons, drill throughs, that sort of thing. We want to get into the Power BI service a little bit later. So that's going to be like, how do you deliver your reports? How do you secure them? Workspaces and apps, AD groups, and so forth. And then we're going to sort of round out the year with data marts and data flows. This is really interesting. Data marts have the potential to really allow you to scale the work that you do and really open it up to a lot of people. And then in the year with a dashboard contest. So so basically we sort of walk you through this process of all the steps that you need to build a report, and then you go build a report and make the best darn report that Nashville's ever seen. So, all right. So these are some of the topics that we're considering for for the future. So for example, like Belinda Allen did a session in AI, and we might want to revisit that. Daniel Odekir did a session on Tabular Editor. That is a super important, very critical tool. It is a little bit advanced, I'll admit, but it's a very important tool to scale your Power BI work. DAX Studio is another great tool that's in that category. Paginated reports are a great way to deliver certain kinds of BI content. And so what I'd love to do is I'd love to hear more from you guys. Like, what of these are you really interested in hearing more about? Because there are certain ones that you're most interested in, most focused on, and we can prioritize those topics based on your feedback. All right, so some announcements. So SQL Saturday Atlanta, this is a BI and data edition. It's coming up not this Saturday, but the next. So it is short notice now. But you still sign up. All SQL Saturdays are all free. So if you want to go, it's just it's cost you the gas to get down there. I'm going to be presenting there on so again this is the 25th. As well as Sekou Tyler, our other fearless leader, he's going to be presenting, and regrettably, our two sessions are at the same time. So unfortunately, I'm going to miss his session. I'm very disappointed in that, but I encourage you to go to his session. It's going to be fantastic. Sekou is always a great presenter. He's always fun to hear from. There's also, and this is a little further out, there's Past Summit. So SQL Saturday, at least originally, I'm not sure how this I'm not sure if this is still the case post pandemic, but SQL Saturday was put on by an organization called PASS, the platform for what was it, the Professional Association for SQL Server, I believe is the acronym. So so this is like their big annual global or national conference, and it's a big deal. I mean, I think it's all week or something, and this one is not, admittedly, not free. But the SQL Saturdays, they're local. They typically do once a year in each location, or sometimes they would do a SQL Server and a BI one, and so those are much more local and free. The Past Summit, there's a ton of stuff, right? They're going to cover everything you could ever imagine here. This is a really great session, a great conference to attend if you can make it out there. So this is in Seattle, and it is in November, the 14th through the 17th. So happens to be one of those days is my birthday. So maybe I'll get to go this year. All right, so we'd like to give a moment for our recruiters just to chat about some of their opportunities that they may have. One of the things we loved about the user group was the ability for people to network and chat with with fellow Power BI developers. Once the pandemic came around, there were a lot of people who maybe were struggling a little bit, and they lost that ability to network, that camaraderie. So we wanted to open it up for recruiters who maybe were looking to fill a position, and they could make that connection. So today we're joined by Eden.
Hey guys.
Yeah, and so he actually recruited me for my current job at AB. So
It's a pleasure.
yeah, so Eden, take it away.
Yes, my name is Eden Walker. I'm a Nashville native. Grew up here, the Franklin, Reapers Fork area. That's kind of where I'm from. But started with my company, Talistry, about 2 years ago. We're a Nashville-focused smaller firm, technology staffing. I've moved more into an account manager role, but like Michael said, I had the pleasure of working with him in my first, honestly, I don't even know if he knows this, but first few months. It was definitely a pleasure to work with him and get him over to Alliance Bernstein. But yeah, I thought it'd be good to come and kind of introduce ourselves, and because we do work on a variety of Power BI related roles across different industries through Nashville, and I'd love to chat if anyone's interested in or know if someone in your colleague, know a colleague in your network that is looking, and discuss further. And I just put a visual up of some of the clients we work with here in Nashville. Don't criticize my visuals too much. I know this is a Power BI group, so but yeah. So anyway, you can also connect me on LinkedIn as well for all the virtual folks. But yeah, thanks for having me, Michael.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right. So what is new in Power BI? So the new hey, thank you. The latest release just came out actually yesterday. So So we're going to go over a little bit of what came out. Now, I encourage you guys to go check the video. So if you go to blog.powerbi.com, it's pinned at the very top of the blog. Every latest release is pinned at the top of the blog. And they've taken to shortening the videos. So the videos were about 20-25 minutes long. This one is like 7 minutes and change. So they're making them very, very pithy, very concise. And, because a lot of it was, they were definitely giving some demos, and they were kind of like, sort of reading through, sort of flying through some things, and you can read this on your own, right? So they decided to just sort of make it a little bit more concise. So they're down to about 7-8 minutes for the video. So very digestible. They go through some demos, and I was going to go through those demos for you, but since we had the difficulty with the AV, I think we're going to skip that today. And I'll just call out sort of what those were. So the first one was this conditional formatting based on string values. So let's say that you're reporting sales for the state for different states, and you want to call out the state of Tennessee specifically. Maybe that's your home state, and you want to specifically call out Tennessee. Maybe you want to make it orange. If you're a UT fan, and so you can do that now. You can say when state equals Tennessee, make it orange. So that is a new feature. They also enhanced the rollup security editor. So before, this had to be done exclusively in DAX. So you had to write logic in DAX that said that mapped out your rollup security logic. You can still do that, and there are some more advanced um, methodologies that you still have to do via the DAX editor. But now there's basically a WYSIWYG editor. So you sort of there's a little thing that pops up, and you can say when you have this group filtered this away. So it makes it a lot easier to create that logic just with some basic clicking and typing. That will also write that DAX for you, right? So if you don't know how to write the DAX logic for the rollup security, there's a little button that will actually take what your inputs and translate that into the DAX for you. And it's actually a nice starting point if you do need to add those more complex components, because you can use that to write the simpler pieces and then maybe make some modifications based on your specific needs. And then the last thing that they pointed out was the get data experience. So you can actually upload straight into the workspace. You can upload Excel and CSV files, as well as you can just paste data straight into the browser. So this is something you've been able to do in Power BI Desktop for a while, but that ability is just sort of copy and paste a table of data straight into the browser. So that is new, and it's nice just to be able to sort of just go straight to the service. It just sort of makes that process a little bit more streamlined. So these are the other topics. They did have a fairly full slate of topics. I think they're just making that video a little bit more concise. So these are some of the main updates that they have put out on the blog since since really January. I'm not going to go through over all of these. I will call out just the optimization ribbon that they announced. This is actually not the newest update. I went back a little ways for this one, but I think that's a really interesting new functionality that if your model is not everything that you want it to be, you can use that ribbon to help you make improvements to the performance of your model. There's some new enhancements and new collaboration enhancements in integrating Power BI and Microsoft Teams. This Power BI data scale out. This is a little advanced, but if you have like super big data sets, like multi-gigabytes in size, and you're having some performance issues, this is a way that basically you sort of up provision the number of the amount of resources in your Power BI premium resources that you put at that, and it sort of does it automatically based on demand. So if you've got just some really large data sets, you've got a lot of people looking at that data set at the same time, then those dedicated resources you have might become bogged down, and this allows you to sort of spin up new resources and dedicate it to that, and it does it kind of on the fly. So this is the other one that I wanted to call out, this Excel's table from Power BI. So there's a function that I really love called Analyze in Excel, and you can click on the little ellipses next to a data set and say Analyze in Excel, and what it gives you is a live connection to that data set. So whatever data set that underpins your Power BI report, you can basically interact with that data set via pivot tables. So it's a really nice way to enable your stakeholders to look at that data, to analyze their own data. So we call this self-service business intelligence. And but you always had to get to it through through pivot tables. Well, this way you can actually get to it through tables. So if you ever like grabbed a table of data and you said format as a table, well, you know that in Excel that's like a special thing. Like it understands like, okay, this is a table with columns and rows. And so what it's going to do is it's going to expose the raw data in the Power BI data set through through those tables. It is live connected, so whenever you refresh it, it will go grab the latest data and it will put it on the worksheet for you. There's some other updates in Power BI apps and Power Automate. In the interest of time, I think I'm going to just sort of move through these. We'll put this deck on the Meetup website so you guys can go check out all these, and they're also all on the Power BI, Power Automate, and Power Apps blogs. So, all right, I think with that, we'll hand it over to Will. Will, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
Appreciate it.
So like Michael said, we're going to start our back to the basics. And even if you're experienced, it's always good to go over the fundamentals again. And then we usually have a lot of people that are starting out, so we thought that it'd be good to just logically go through the parts of Power BI for people that are starting out. Let me get my desktop set up real quick. I wonder if somebody could watch Teams. I don't think I've heard Teams beeping, but none of us in the room had our laptops open. And this is my laptop, so I couldn't look at it. But if I look real quick, I don't think anybody has said anything, so that's a good thing. We didn't miss your message. You can do that. Thanks, Sekou. So let me get my presentation ready. So we're gonna start with Power Query today, and this is usually something people skip over. They come to Power BI for the data, for the visualizations and developing the report, and that when they have their data, they might prep it a different way, and they want to get straight to the visualization, so they kind of skip over the Power Query part. But hopefully today you will learn more about it and not want to skip over it, and learn how it can help you. So I'm going to start by talking about, let me grab my notes that I left. I'm going to tell you what it is first, the what, who, when, where, and why of Power Query. And so like Michael said, it's an ETL tool. It's for connecting to all the data out there in the world. And I thought I'd start with drawing a diagram. So that's always good to whiteboard something to describe it. Let's see. Just gonna get some white space here. So the way I would draw Power Query is you've got your, or I should do your Excel files. You've got your CSVs. You've got your databases. You've got your cloud services that you connect to. And so Power Query, we'll draw it over here. It provides the way to connect to all of these. So there's different software that understands these data sources and how to turn them into a common format, which is a table. So it does a very good job at connecting to the variety of types of data, whether it be XML, JSON, CSV, Excel, multiple database tables, cloud services. So it kind of takes all that variety and gets it into a common format. And then it gives you all these great tools to transform the data. So those are the two things that it does really well. And then, of course, to fit it in with what your workflow in Power BI, you've got your database in Power BI, the model. And so it loads the data in there. And so we'll talk about this more, but your data model, you want it to be a very organized, clean data set, because this is what you're going to be visualizing. And in many cases, like Michael was talking about, analyze in Excel, your users might go straight to the model. That might be something they use and see. So you want it to be labeled nicely and organized in a user-friendly way. So Power Query lets you organize that model, gives you all the tools you need to get it cleaned up and organized. And then finally, in Power BI, you've got your visuals that's why we're all here, that's supposed to be a bar chart, is the Power BI visualization. So I think it makes sense that if you do a good job on the front end, that's going to make your report better, and you're probably going to have to live with that report for a while. So down the road, if you do a good job on the front end, you're going to have a better experience with that dashboard, making changes and enhancements to it over time. So that's our diagram description. But I thought I would also, I think I exited my presentation. I'll just leave it like this. So as far as the what, that's kind of the whiteboard. I thought I'd also talk about the names that Power Query has been called over the years. So it was called Get and Transform. You can see how that fit with the diagram. Those are the two things it does. It connects and transforms the data. It was originally called Data Explorer, and that is my favorite of the names because it's very good at analyzing the data in the wild. You can look at rows and columns and understand a lot about them without doing anything to the data. It's just sitting where it's sitting in the world or on your computer, and you can understand a lot about it and analyze it. So I like it as a data exploration tool. And then finally, what it's called today is Power Query. So it fits in with all the power tools. And I think what that word power means is they've taken all the power that the IT department had with their developer tools and made them user-friendly while still maintaining the power for everybody else. So this tool takes the querying power that the IT department had with SQL and other tools and gives the users that power in a more user-friendly way. So you can also query other ways that you might not have thought about, but like a pivot table in Excel is a form of a query. So if you're asking questions of data, you're probably querying in some way. You might be doing it manually in Excel, but it's still a query. So that's what Power Query, that's what it does. And then who is it for? So we've kind of talked about that a little bit. It's really for everybody. But if you're a data analyst or if you're using Power BI, it's obviously for you. But it's also for the people in IT. So it's so powerful that they don't use a separate set of tools. A lot of people use this. There's not another better Power BI. Power BI is the visualization tool for everybody. And then we could mention executives. So there's lots of executives that use Power Query because they have in their responsibilities, they need to get answers from data. So they use Power Query. And then when, so this is maybe a silly question, but I wanted to cover all the facts. So it runs when you click the refresh button. It runs when you make a change, it'll refresh all the way to the data source. And then you can also schedule it so it'll run anytime. So Power Queries can run anytime, even when you're sleeping. They can be automated. And then when, or I said when, where. So you can use this at home or at work. So Power BI Desktop is free. So you can download it and use Power Query as a part of Power BI Desktop. It's also found in other applications. So Power BI Desktop has it. The latest versions of Excel have it. You can use it in the browser. There's a few versions of Power Query online. Data flows is what the version is called in the Power BI service. And then there's some IT tools, SQL Server integration services, and SQL Server analysis services that also have Power Query built in. So there's a lot of places you can use it, and you can use it. It's free, so you should be able to use it on any computer. And now the last two questions are probably the most important: why and how. So the reason why is that it is probably you'll probably be able to do something better than you are currently. So some use cases for Power Query are if you are getting data into Excel, you might be copying it from somewhere, manually formatting it. Power Query could automate that for you. And if you have to do it repeatedly, it's probably a better way to get data into Excel than other methods. If you're doing ad hoc queries, so the end result is the answer to the query, and it's a one-time thing. Somebody asks you a question, and you might go write a SQL query to get the answer. I would recommend using Power Query for that. It's a great ad hoc querying tool, and it can query databases and outside of databases with the same querying methods. And I find that when I do an ad hoc query, I'm more willing to answer and ask more questions because I can answer them quicker than I would if I was doing a SQL query. Another one might be you do a lot of manual stuff in Excel, just copying and pasting. This is a great use case for that. And then finally, the use case that you're probably here for is getting your data prepped for your Power BI dashboard. So that's it'll probably do it better than a method if you skip over it. So some skipping over methods might be you do it in SQL queries, or you manually prepare the data in Excel and then connect Power BI to that Excel file. That will result in something you have to do manually every time you want to refresh the data. So Power Query might be a better, the reason why you'd want to use it is it might be a better way to prepare your data. So the how is we're going to jump into some demos and actually look at using it. So this will be our demo portion. So if you don't have Power BI installed, you would just Google download Power BI Desktop. And I think this is it right here, where it says downloads. Actually, that's not it. You have an intermediate page here, but if you go to the download right here, that'll take you, there's two options. You can go to the store, the Microsoft Store, or you can do the advanced download and download it and install it on your computer. And click this download button. And you want to get the 64-bit version. So the method for my demo here, I'm not going to pause because we are recording this. So if you want to follow along, you can go to our YouTube channel after and kind of pause it and do what I'm doing. But since not everybody's going to follow along, I don't want to bore the people who are just watching. So I'm going to go through it quickly. And if you want to do it, you can check the recording later. So let's look at our sample data first. So I'm getting this sample data, as you might have seen on that web page I had up. So I'll put this link in the chat and show it on the screen. So if you want to take a picture of that, that's where we're going to get our sample data. And I'm going to put it in the chat for those of you online. So this is a good data set to start with. It's got a lot of interesting stuff in it. And so you'd click on this yellow button here, click here to download the sample databases. And all it is, it's not a database, it's just Excel files. And we're going to be using the AdventureWorks 2000. So I wanted to plug the book that this comes from. It's really a Microsoft data set, but he updated it so it's not so dated. So that's why I think this is a good one. But if you're learning Power BI, I would recommend this book. He writes for normal people, and he's been teaching Power BI for 7 years, and he teaches it really well. And he goes through all the hard stuff, so I highly recommend that book. But wanted to plug it since I'm using the data set he's hosting and sharing it with you guys. So I've downloaded that data set. It comes down as a zip file with the AdventureWorks 2000 and the AdventureWorks 2005. We're going to use the 2001. So let's look at the data really quick that we're going to work with. So this is the Excel file that you would download. And it's not small. So you can see that there's just tables of data in here. So we have calendar data table. We have products. So AdventureWorks is a bike company. So that's the kind of products they have is bikes and tubes for tires and things like that. And then you've got your customers, lots of interesting information about your customers. You've got kind of a summary territory table. And then this is the main table where we've got all the sales. And so that's just a basic look at the data we're going to be using. But I'm going to close the Excel file. And we're going to jump into connecting to data in Power BI. So I'm going to launch Power BI Desktop. I already had one open, so I'm just going to open another. This. And you'd think I'd have it pinned up here, but I usually don't use this laptop for work. So there is a welcome screen here. I'm gonna just go past that. So when you start with a blank workbook, it has this nice splash screen here to have you connect to data. So you could start with an Excel file, data from a database. You could paste data in, or you could try their sample data. They've also got the ribbon up here that's all about connecting to data. And I'm going to really quick just show you the more window so you can see. We'll just see how many things you can connect to. And so this is the beginning of the Power Query experience where we're connecting to different data sources. There it is. So this is all the different data sources you can connect to. That's quite a few. And I wasn't intending for you to read that, just to get the sense that there's a lot. I don't know how many there are. But what we're going to do is connect to that Excel workbook. So I can click right up here on the ribbon, Excel workbook. And then I'm going to navigate to that folder. So the first preview screen we get is it's going to show us all the tabs in the workbook, and it gives us a chance to preview the data. So if I click on a table, it'll show me a sample of the data so I can see if that's even something I want to work with. So I'm already eliminating things I don't need. And I'm not going to bring in the budget. I do want the calendar. I do want my customers. So I can go through and just pick what I want. I'm going to take everything else. So once I've checked what I want, I can either directly load it. That would skip Power Query. We don't want to do that. We want to use Power Query, so we're going to click Transform Data. I didn't click Load, did I? I thought I clicked Transform Data. It looks like it's loading it. Okay. I don't know why I did that pre-connecting step. So we are now in the Power Query editor here, and there's a lot of stuff on the screen, and I'm gonna describe a lot of it to you, but not everything. So there's definitely things we're not going to cover in this intro. But I'm going to again draw on the screen here and tell you a little bit about the things on here. So what's cool about the Power Query window, it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife where pretty much everything on here you can right click on, and it has a menu of things you can do. So there's a lot of actions you can take on your data in this window, but I'm just going to highlight some of the areas here. So this pane over here is your query list. My handwriting's not good, and it's even worse on my screen. And I think I spelled that wrong. This is your query list. So this is all the queries you create are listed here. So like every tab in the spreadsheet is a query. If I brought in another table from a database, it would be a query. And then every change I make to it gets to be a part of that query. And then we've got this area here, which is the formula bar. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And then the main area here is usually a table of data. It's your data. So that's something I like about this tool is you're always looking at the data. It keeps it front and center all the time. So we'll just label this. That's too small. That's the formula bar. And then over on this side, you've got properties of the query you have selected. So right now, territories is selected, so you can see that it's got the name territory. There's more properties, but really territories usually the name's all that I update there. And then down here, this is a very important section. This is the applied steps. So we'll talk about this in a minute. But every time you take an action on your data, it's going to record those steps so that it can automatically be repeated later. And then we have the ribbon up here. So this is familiar with Excel and all the Office suite. But this has all the things you can do to your data. You can combine queries, you can summarize queries, you can replace values, you can delimit things. So this is the Home tab. This is kind of higher level, connecting to data, merging query tasks that are frequent, and then some data transformations that are that are frequently used. And then the other two important tabs are the transform and the add columns. So transform is going to actually change your data in some way, whether it be making everything uppercase or rounding numbers. There's a whole ribbon of transform that we'll look at. And then the add column is similar to the transform, except it's not going to change your data. It's going to add a column to your data set, but has a similar number of buttons to make transformations on the way to adding another column. So that's kind of the overview of the UI. And so we're gonna use it together. So I was going to I'll start with one of these tables here and just do some basic operations to it. So I'm going to start by just sorting this column. So I can see in my ribbon here that there's a sort button. And so I clicked that. You'll notice that it applied the step of sort rows over here. And if I go back to the previous step, I see the data as it was before I sorted. And I can go back a step further. You'll notice this step was called change type. When I go back before, notice this ABC123 on this column. If I go to change type, it is now just 123. This little number in the top of each header in the table is the data type, and you can click on it and change it to the appropriate data type that it is, whether it be text, a date, or a number, or decimal number. So this is part of putting your Power BI. You're creating a data model, and so you want to clean and organize your data. Setting the data types is an important part of making sure that you're getting the right data and the data you expect. If you think it's a number but there's text values in it, it'll throw an error and let you know that it'll still load it with a null, but it'll let you know that there's something wrong. So it's just part of keeping your data organized. And then you also want to set the right data type, because in Power BI, you can't really sum up a text field. So if you made a number a text field, you would have problems down the road. So you want to make sure your data types are set correctly. If I go up further, I can see that when I connected, Power BI did some things automatically. This is just my raw Excel spreadsheet with the headers. It promoted the headers for me and auto-detected the data type. Sometimes it doesn't do it correctly. It's just sampling like the top 1,000 rows. So you do want to verify that it got the data types correct. That's one thing that's always good to check. If it did not promote your headers, you can do that with this use first row as headers button up here. That would take the first row and make it the column headers like this. So we sorted our data using the ribbon button. I'm actually going to hit the X. So any of these applied steps, you can actually drag them so they happen in a different order if you want to. You can also delete them by hitting the X. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to show you another way to sort. So I mentioned it's like a Swiss Army knife. There's a lot of different ways. It makes it very efficient to use because you can, I could work with the ribbon. I could also sort by going to the column in question, and I can say sort descending here. So it's the same action, but I can do it in the column header. So they made it a very productive tool in the way that you can do things many, many different ways. So the next thing I want to do is I want to start exploring the data in here. I mentioned that this used to be called Data Explorer when it first came out, and it's really great for that. So what I'm going to do is show you, so obviously we can navigate our data, we can scroll through, we can look at different tables. Just this isn't very much different than Excel. However, some things I can do that are neat are I can click on a row, and you'll notice this preview at the bottom. This is really the data preview pane. It disappears until you select something, and then it appears. But I like to do this for very wide tables. Let me go to our customers table because it's a wider table. So some tables I'm sure you've experienced, there's hundreds of columns, and so trying to scroll across and digest the data is pretty hard. But if you click the row, it kind of gives you a form view of that one row. And I think this is super helpful just for my eye, just to look down. These are all the fields and the values in one row of the table. So I can see the customer key, all the different information about that one customer. So I get a better sense of the data I have available, probably than scrolling across 100 rows. So that's very helpful. Another data exploration thing this provides is if you click on a column, it gives you some information about the column. So it gives you a bar chart with the distribution of items, and it also gives you statistics about that column, the min and the max. That's kind of silly for the marital status, but there you have it. Let me click on a numeric column. So this, you see, there's a different distribution. So geography key, there's probably a geography table we don't have that has what their location is, but whatever 612 is, that's the one that shows up the most. But yeah, it looks like people are from all over the place. You can see the distinct counts, the unique, the min and the max. They give you all of the statistics. This one is always funny to me, even and odd. I wonder when that would be helpful to know how many evens and how many odds there were. But you get all the statistics down there. Let me try to find something more interesting, like occupation, for example. So there's less items. We can see the distribution. So this is very helpful. And again, exploring your data, you get all these summaries for free just by clicking on the column or click on a row. You can see that whole row in a form view. So these are great things to get to know your data before you've even done anything with it. Another cool thing while you're in here is you can hover on a bar and say equals, and it will automatically add a filter. So I could dive in more to people who are in a skilled manual occupation buying bikes. I could then look at other information about them filtered when the data set's filtered to that occupation. So it's easy to filter, it's easy to slice and dice and look at it all the ways. Another thing we could do is, so one thing I didn't point out is notice that the count of rows is 1,000. This always runs on a sampling of the data, just in case you're connected to a really big data set. It doesn't want to automatically calculate all these summary numbers and just destroy your computer. So it starts out with 1,000, but you can see down here column profiling based on 1,000 rows, top 1,000 rows. If you click on that, you can switch it to the entire data set. So you'd only want to do that if your data is a manageable size. So this one's not terrible. It's just the customers. So there's 18,000. So now I'm getting a profile that is the full data set. So I can see that there's 5,000 professional people going to the bike store. So that's my quick tour of exploring the data. The next thing I want to do is let's just explore the data a little more, just to understand the data we're looking at. So we have a calendar table. So this is important in Power BI. We're going to want to keep this. So again, we got to think about where we're headed. We want to have an organized data model at the end that is going to serve our dashboard, serve our users when they connect directly to it. So we're thinking through what data do they want to see, what's going to support my dashboard. So we're thinking about all those things as we look through here. And so since people like to slice data by time, we're definitely going to keep our calendar table. It's got lots of useful attributes, some that are just generic about the calendar, some are about our business, the fiscal year. It's got our fiscal calendar in there, and perhaps some budget month IDs. I don't know exactly what the month ID is, but I don't really need this ID column. I just need the date. So I'm going to right click on this column and say remove. You can see this is one of those right click where you can just right click and do a lot of stuff. I'm not going to go into everything you can do today, but there's lots to explore here. Let's take a look at our customers again. I'm going to look for things that I want to keep, things that I don't want to keep. I probably don't care about their personal information since I'm creating a summary dashboard. I can probably get rid of their name, their phone number, their address. I would like to know their geography. I guess we don't have that data here. We have the geography key with nothing to know what it means. But if I want to get rid of a bunch of columns at once, you can go to the choose columns on the ribbon up here. And it'll give you a list where you can just pick the columns that you want. So I'm going to get rid of the personal stuff because that isn't something that I need. I probably will keep the first purchase date, the number of cars, if they own a house, occupation. These are all generally summarizable things. So that added a remove other column step over here. And I can see I just have the columns I'm interested in. I also want to point out, you'll notice over here in the applied steps that there are little gray gears over here. If you ever do a transformation that had like a pop-up, it'll put that gear over here so you can open up that pop-up again. So if I wanted to change, I decide I don't want yearly income, I could modify that selection. And now yearly income's gone. Except I think I do want it, so I'm going to put it back. So before we go further with our explanation, I wanted to do a fuller mention of knowing where we're going. So we're heading towards a Power BI data model. So there's some things we want to know about what our data model should be like. So you may not have heard this before, or you may have, but it's worth mentioning. Where you want to go with your Power BI data model is a star schema. It's a way of organizing the data where every attribute has its own table. So our sample data here is kind of already organized this way a little bit. So if we look at our customers again, there's a customer key, which is the unique identifier. So in our star schema, we want a table that has the unique identifier for the customer, and then all attributes about that customer. So that it's that unique we want an object with something that identifies it uniquely. And so we want that for our customers, for our products, for our territories, for our calendar. Obviously, the unique item there is the date. So let me go back to my PowerPoint and show you a little bit of what this looks like. So I don't know for certain how the star schema got its name, but I imagine it was like the people who looked at the constellations decided that those stars look like somebody's belt, and that looks like a little dipper. It's whoever came up with it decided. So there should be a table right here as well. But they looked at this and thought, that looks like a star. So we're going to call that a star schema. So what's unique about this is you kind of have those objects in their own tables with their unique identifier. Customers' products, they each have their own key, and they have all the attributes about them. So the reason this is good is many reasons. One is it performs the fastest. Another one is it's the most user-friendly for your users. And we'll look at that in a minute. But when somebody's looking through the field list, it's nice to have all the customer fields grouped together, or all the product fields grouped together, as opposed to if you just had one gigantic table, they would have a hard time looking through and understanding what the data represents. But if it's in the customer table, then you know it's a customer attribute. And then the third reason is that Power BI was built for this, and the DAX language really works the best when you've got things you want to aggregate and count and do analysis, complex analysis on. If it's in its own table with a unique row, that usually helps you with your calculations down the stream. So I wanted to contrast this really quick with some of the other options, just to clarify further what a star schema is. So our data, if we just loaded it, it would actually be called a snowflake schema. And this is another one of those. My explanation is just like drawing a constellation. So I don't know why this, but imagine there's like other tables. So somebody decided that this was like a snowflake. I can't draw a snowflake, but there's just like all these things, like a pattern of tables everywhere. Some IT person decided that this was a snowflake. But basically what I'll point out is that there's multiple relationships between the things you're gonna, like the products, the attributes of the product you're gonna slice your data by, and the actual transaction table of sales. So if I filtered on the category, product category, it would then filter the subcategory, which would then filter the products, which would then filter the sales, and then you'd sum up your sales. So this would work, but it might not perform as quickly because there's those additional filtering relationships. And it's not user-friendly for your users, because when they look at the field list, they're going to see all of that. They're going to see products. They're going to see a separate table for subcategory and another table for category. When if it's just all in the product table, it's easier for them to digest. So that's called the snowflake. So that works, but is less preferable to the star schema. And then finally, you guys are all familiar with this, the big table approach. So this performs less well. While it starts out very user-friendly, you've gathered all your data in one place and it's just one table to look at. It's harder for the user to look through. Like I don't know which fields go with the customer or a product as easily, at least. So I don't, like, for example, group, I have no idea what that is just by looking at it. But if it was on the products table, I might have a better idea. what group represents. And then it's going to be very hard to do some DAX calculations with the big table method. So all that to say, star schema is the way to go. And it's where we want to go. It's what we want to use Power Query to shape our data into, is to shape it into this star schema data model. So that's what we're going to do with the remaining of our time. Well, we're going to do one more thing after we do that, and it won't take us long. So you'll notice that I do have, so everything in this data set pretty much is already in a star schema, which is good. The only thing that's not is the products and the subcategory and category are in separate tables. And we want to put those all into one table, so we're not doing that multiple filter relationship thing we talked about. So if we look here on one row, we have a lot of attributes of our product. The product key is the unique identifier. And then we have a product subcategory key, which is the row identifier for this table. So this table starts with that product subcategory key. And then if we look at this table, you can see that the product category key is on here that links to this table. So what we're going to do is, first I'm going to maybe trim down the number of fields in my products table that I want. So I'm going to go again to choose columns. And for the sake of time, I'm going to just deselect things that don't look like they're of interest to me. A lot of these are like supply chain. That might not be my area. So I might not be interested in that. I might not be interested in the description, the price. So I'm going to trim this down a little bit. And then the next thing I want to do is merge in my subcategory so it's not in a separate table. So I'm going to go up here to the combine area of the ribbon and say merge queries. And that's going to pop up with this merge dialog. And I can pick, I'm in the products table right now, and it's showing me some sample data. And I can pick another query. So I'm going to pick the product subcategory. And then I'm going to pick the header of the two columns that match. And that's how I will merge the data. They'll merge on whatever matches. And it tells me down below that there's a match for every row. So I'll hit OK. And that adds a column on that it could contain multiple rows. So again, I can click in the gray space over here and get a preview down below of what table is in there. I can expand this to actually see the data by clicking this expand button. And I can pick which columns I want. And I just want the English name. I also want the product category key, because I'm gonna have to join again, do another merge to get the category text as well. You'll notice there's Spanish and French. I just want the English. So it added on my English product subcategory name and product category key. So I'm going to do another merge. And I'm going to get my category. And I'm going to click on the product category key on both tables. And there's a match for all of them. And we're going to do the same expand. And this time we're only going to get the English product category. So again, I can click on this and understand, after I've merged them all together, understand how many items are in each category. So I'm also going to rename, because I just brought the English back and everybody at my office speaks English. I'm going to rename these to just not have English in front. So that's more user-friendly. I also don't need these unique identifiers now that I've got it all joined together. So I'm gonna control click both of those and right click, remove, and that removed both. So I've now merged these in with products. So I have that one table, so I can have one relationship to sales with this product table. I don't want to load these tables now that I've got the data in products. So if I right click on the query, this again, you can see there's so much you can do with a query, but I'm not going to go into all of it. You'll have lots to explore. But the one thing I wanted to do is to uncheck the enable load. So I don't want these to go into my data model, just because they're intermediate steps, and the columns with the data are going to go in with my products like that. So for sales, I'm also going to deselect some columns because I don't want a lot of this. So you would have to do more analysis than I'm doing now, but I'm just doing this quickly so I get to the things that are more important. But there is some good data in here. We've got quantity, units, sales amount, cost. So we have a lot of good data in our data set. And then finally, territory. I think I'll keep this just as it is. That looks good. So this is where the group came from, that you wouldn't know what it was if you had your big table, but since it's on the territory, it makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and load this data in, and we'll see what it looks like. So I hope you saw that this data is pretty clean, but whatever messiness your data had, like columns merged together, splitting them apart, changing data types, you have a lot of tools there in Power Query to make the data the shape that Power BI wants it to be. And it's going to support your visualizations. So I'm going to come in here and see what my tables look like. So there's my sales. It auto joined some of my tables together, but now I can just drag and complete the final relationships. So I've got my nice, just one relationship between my data table and all the other tables. So I want to throw a quick wrench, even though I should probably be concluding, but I did want to do one like more advanced common scenario you guys might encounter. So this is all nice and well. We've got our really organized data set. We can probably use this in future sessions, Michael, or you probably have another data set. But you could use this to answer a lot of questions about this business. But let's say Rob over in accounting finished the budget for the year, and he sends you this file that looks like this. So we've got the AdventureWorks budget. We've got the months as the headers, and we've got the categories, and we've got these budget amounts. And we want to be able to match this up with our other data. So I'm going to really quickly show you how I would do that in Power Query. So I'm going to connect to another Excel workbook. So I'm going to press that Excel workbook ribbon again. And I'll go up to that Excel file. And let's see, I'm going to connect to the sheet, transform data. So one thing, I think I'm going to run out of time, but I'll do the fun part. So basically what I was going to do is I was going to parse out the date and then join it up. Well, let's just see if I can do it quickly. I didn't want it to promote the headers. Well, yeah, you'll have to believe me that we can do that. We could parse out the date or the year from this header and then use it later. What I'm going to do is show you the unpivot. So a lot of data comes pivoted, but it's easier to work with it when it's unpivoted. And so Power Query has a cool function for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the top rows because this is like a report template that is always the same. So I'll remove the top 3 rows. And then I'm going to promote the headers. And I don't want the grand total down here. So I'm going to right click on that cell and say does not equal. And then we'll scroll over here. I don't really want this grand total at the end, so I'm going to remove that. And then I'm going to go over to the transform tab, which we didn't really look at a ton, but you can see there's a lot to explore here. They have it organized by data type. So for any data type, you can do these sorts of things. For text columns, for number columns, for date time, they've got specific transformations. The one I'm going to do quickly is unpivot columns. And there's an option to unpivot other columns, which is what I'm going to use. And so you can see just like that, we've turned it into category, month, and budget amount. So what I would have done is parsed out the year and added it to the month and actually turned it into a date, but I'm out of time, so I'm not going to do that. But now we've got, I'm going to go ahead and name this budget. And I'm going to load that in. So this isn't, I didn't fully transform this the way it needs to be, but I would join month to the date so that you can slice the budget by the same time as sales. And I would structure it so that you could slice category by budget and products at the same time. So we would have done that with Power Query to get it all organized. But let me jump back to my slides. So I think we noted that the data in the real world is not organized the way it should be. So we have to transform it. And that Power Query is a great tool to get it organized for the way Power BI likes it. And it's going to support your visuals. We also talked about how Power Query is a great ad hoc tool. So I would recommend if you have time, try it over a SQL query, try it over opening an Excel spreadsheet and just manually doing stuff or writing formulas. Just get used to using it as a way to look at data. And I think that's a great way to start learning, is to build that habit of just use it for everything. And then if you're getting data into Excel through other methods, try Power Query. And then if you're doing a lot of manual stuff in Excel, consider starting with an easy task first, because some things are very complicated and you're going to just get frustrated trying to do it with Power Query. But baby steps, try automating some things you do with Power Query.
Don't go cost per PDF.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah, don't do a PDF at all as your first one. I would recommend.
Yeah, that was rough. Finally got it to work, but not beginner stuff. There's a bit sort of like, wait, what?
Yep. So any questions before I conclude?
got test data mixed in with production data. And, yeah, so it looks I don't really need to transform the data as much as I'm trying to exclude records within a table, a data set that are test records. And I haven't found an easy way to do that programmatically. And I think this is too complicated for the time I have. I just wondered if there's in Excel, I use filters and stuff, but it's still a little bit manual.
Yeah. I might say have an Excel spreadsheet where you put the test identifier at least. Because if there's no way to programmatically identify it, a person has to, right? And if you put it in a spreadsheet that Power BI is connecting to, or another data source.
Instead of just Power BI, is that what you're saying?
I was saying, so to kind of automate the rest of it, have a separate process where you just put the test records in a spreadsheet that Power BI then connects to filter things out. I guess you have to do it either way. You'd have to do it manually every time anyway, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to go through the process of identifying what is a test data set. I think just having a separate file, so you don't have to do it every time. Like if you identify 100 test records yesterday, you don't want to have to find them again and then delete them each time. That's my thought, is if you save it off, you won't have to redo the work for the older test records.
But there's search and exclude records that may contain test data.
If you can identify them with some, like it contains test in the user's name or something, you could do it. So you'd have to know a way to do it though. Yeah. Yeah, you could filter the same way in Excel, but I was understanding that you couldn't, that it was a little bit random and you couldn't.
It is. Some of them say that if I look for the word test, I might find some of them, but there are legitimate records where the word test appears in the name, it's an event name.
Yeah.
And I would exclude production data.
Yeah, that's tough. Sounds like Mike might have has dealt with that for you. Yeah.
I'm trying to where you wrote us.
Nice.
Does require the data to be structured? Or is there an opportunity to use other tools? I've heard about MongoDB, I mean, these unstructured data, is that a thing within Power BI or is that outside?
So that would be outside. So it's got a certain database type that is structured. It can connect to the unstructured and turn it into structured.
Oh,
But yeah, definitely. Yep. So it's kind of fun when you connect to an unstructured, the way it handles it. It kind of puts it into a table, but you can expand things that have more rows. So give it a try. Try like a JSON document.
How many levels down the classes? More at the top, the beginning, how far down is that complexity?
I think you could give it a try, and if it's too scary, you can. But if you're doing unstructured, that is a little scary to start with.
Not that, so. So if you had somebody that was used to working with an unstructured data, you one of those languages that embrace it before you, right? So, and then you would have Harvey essentially run that and sort of drop out a table of data that comes along. So it is a formatted unstructured data and gives you a table, structured table, and output.
Okay.
So, if you're gonna visualize data, it needs to be structured in some way, is turn this function into the structure. Or the finance structure.
Any other thoughts or questions? I was just checking the comments.
No good, only changing dimension part. I saw Ken post this thing to do that. Now it's like, really, that looks really painful. Cause it's, a friend of mine's a baker, right? So it's product and then recipe and then ingredient, and then ingredients is only changing dimension. So fortunately, he's only doing one a week. So essentially, I have to create a different version of the ingredient every single week. And that's,
Why don't-
right?
Why don't we conclude and I can talk to you
Okay,
about that because that sounds advanced.
so I hope it is, 'cause I'm like, this hurts my brain.
Yeah,
I watched Ken's thing like 3 times. I'm like, yeah, my brain still hurts. I'm sorry.
yeah. Well, guys, we'll go ahead and conclude and join us next month. Hopefully here, we'll see. We learned that this office is closing in a month, so next month might be our last meeting here, so we'll see. But we will keep you guys posted. But yeah, join us next time for Michael's session on the next part of Power BI. Thanks, everybody, for joining online. Thank you. Thanks.
Seeing that.
What's that? You always enjoy it?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thanks, Will.
Yeah. Yeah, I left it in the car. I mean, I did this one with like fixed prices
Mhm.
and it worked. It was really easy. And I'm sort of like, oh, yeah. But... So I watched